That's nothing my wife would say I am, but that's
Okay.
okay.
I'm standing here watching. You know, part of the problem is that I'm sitting near that thing, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. Today is October 17th, 2014, and I'm sitting here with Ben Lambert, and he is going to give us a little oral history interview. We're at the RIT Inn and Conference Center, and now Mr. Lambert will, I guess, introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Ben Lambert, and I live in New Hampshire. I live in Campton, New Hampshire in the winter and Edgewater, Florida in the summer. I was in the printing business for many, many years in a number of capacities, and I attribute my start to my RIT experience in printing. I was in the classes of 1960 through 1964, which for RIT was a pretty turbulent time. It was the era of civil rights, and the school was beginning to experience growing pains. And I can remember when the school announced that they were going to be moving out to South Henrietta. And as a matter of fact, my senior year, we had a freshman orientation day on the land that the school had just bought, and it was just a field. I remember the tug of war and
Yep, we
the
have
hamburgers
pictures.
and hot dogs and things like that.
We have pictures.
During the time I was there, I was a full-time student. My first year, I lived in the dorms, which was the old, I think it was the old Nathaniel Rochester Hotel. I may be wrong about the name, but it was that was the men's dorm. It was right on Main Street. And the school could provide housing for freshmen, but after that, you were kind of much on your own. Upper-class students did stay in the dorm, but I moved out and pledged a fraternity, which at that time was the first pledge class of, that was a local fraternity called Theta Gamma. And I was a member of the first pledge class of Phi Sigma Kappa, which I understand more recently has had problems on campus, but during the time that I was there, we were one of the campus leaders. My fraternity experience for me was a very, very positive experience. Little things like at dinner time, we had a house mother, Margaret Porter, at the Phi Sig house, which was on 29 Atkinson Street. And one of the things that we were required to do was wear a coat and tie to dinner. And things like that. We tried to be a fraternity that had a little bit of class, and of course we were always most of the fraternity system, the Greek system, both fraternities and sororities at that time, were out-of-state students or people who lived not in the Rochester area, because our whole social life was built around that. School didn't offer a lot of opportunities for that. It was kind of like a city school, and a lot of people went home at night, so that people gravitated towards the fraternity and sorority system. At least this is my impression. And consequently, we worked extra hard to have the RIT spirit. And our spring weekends and fall weekends put on by the Greek system were pretty spectacular. One thing I remember specifically was we had American Heritage was the theme for one of our spring weekends. I think it might have been my junior year. Well, it would have been 63, but I'm not sure of the year. In the backyard of our fraternity house on 29 Atkinson Street, we constructed a replica of the ship Old Ironsides. We built it around a car, and you'll see pictures of that in the yearbook. One of the things that we didn't calculate very much was the height of the masts. Luckily, one of the fraternity brothers' father worked for Rochester Gas and Electric, I think it was called, and we had to get a cherry picker truck to come in and get the wires out of the way so that we could navigate onto the route, which was the main street in Rochester. The other thing that we didn't calculate too much was how was the driver of this old car, I think it was an old Dodge, was going to see. And so we've kind of cut a hole in the dashboard, and he was able to see the line on the street. And then we had people positioned on either side of the float, saying a little to the left, a little to the right, stop, go. We had cannons on the side of our ship, and we had cherry bomb firecrackers in cans that would cause a muffled explosion, and then CO2 fire extinguishers inside, which when we fired the guns, the smoke came out. So, and it was a pretty exciting time. So anyway, that's one of my memorable events. What else?
Well, we have some questions here, and what was your major? I think you mentioned that.
I was in the printing department, and I had worked as a printer before I came to college. Actually, what happened is I went to Boston University for one semester. I was very young. I was 17 years old. It was a big, huge school. I wasn't ready, so I was smart enough to realize I wasn't ready. So I went to work at Nick's Esso station in Lowell, Mass, and that was my sabbatical from college for a year. And then I worked in a printing company. And when I worked in that printing company, that was my first introduction to the industry. And one of my fellow workers had been to RIT, I think only for 2 years. And I didn't know anything about the college. I didn't know that a college existed that could offer a bachelor's in printing. Who ever heard of anything like that?
Right.
So I went back to college about 3 years after I got out of high school.
Here's some questions about your classes. So where were your classes held, and what buildings, and any faculty that you remember?
Yeah, I remember Tony Sears. Tony Sears taught offset press. Most of our printing courses, I think, were in the Clark building, but I'm not positive of the name of it.
Probably.
I think it was corner of Spring Street.
That's the Clark building.
And Tony Sears was he was an instructor in offset press. I don't believe he had a bachelor's degree. I think he was taking courses to get his bachelor's degree. There weren't, because there weren't college professors in the
No.
printing industry. So he often said, right in the beginning, especially to freshmen, if you're here to become a printer, don't waste your money. Turn around, go back to the trade and learn your trade from a journeyman. If you're here to learn about the printing industry and how to learn, then this is the place for you.
Right.
And that was wise advice, I think, for us at that time.
Any other faculty?
Alexander Lawson,
Oh, right.
who's well known in the RIT community, and one of the classes that I took with him, I was taught to hand set type. I wrote a poem, I hand set the type.
Oh, that's nice.
I put the type together into a chase and onto a small letterpress, and was able to print. That was the first. So I began to understand the whole idea of movable type and type design, and he was, as we used to call, he was a heavy hitter. He really knew his stuff.
Yes. Did you do a co-op?
No, co-op was not offered in the printing
Not in the
industry.
printing,
One
no.
of the reasons, I think, was that the printing industry at that time was so heavily unionized. As a matter of fact, I had worked in a union shop back in Massachusetts, and when I went back to work that summer, they said, no, you're not able to come back and work, because although you are still a union member, you're going to be management, and we don't really have an opening for you.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was. But so many of my fellow classmates were going to go back to family businesses. And that's how they got interested in the printing.
Right.
I didn't. I came a whole different route.
What did your parents or your dad
My father was a doctor.
Was he?
He'd been to Harvard Medical School. My mother was a social worker. So I was the first guy to kind of go off in another direction.
Another direction. Interesting. Did you take humanities courses like English and?
Yeah, I did. As a matter of fact, Andy Johnson was another instructor who I remember. He taught fundamentals of advertising. And those courses I did very well in. Western Civilization. I seemed to do very well in the liberal arts courses. Philosophy of religion, I got an A in. Advertising, I got an A in. Some of the more technical courses that required the use of a slide rule, I was in trouble. There were no calculators.
Right.
And I took chemistry, college chemistry at RIT, when I had never taken chemistry in high school.
Right.
And so I got a B for the fall quarter, and a C for the winter quarter, and a D for the spring quarter. It showed you that I was really struggling. I could understand concepts, but the slide rule pretty much defeated me. So
Yeah, but I suppose the chemistry was useful for understanding ink.
Yeah.
Paper.
Ink and the whole chemistry, especially pH kinds of things, understanding the solutions that we used in the printing industry. But I early on pretty much decided that from a technical standpoint, I was not going to become a printer.
Right.
So I took the basic course
Right.
as opposed to the technical course.
Right. So you had an overall
I went
broader
in-
understanding.
I went into management, ended up owning a company.
Right. That's
Doing the sales and marketing part of that for just about my entire working life.
so you started your own company.
I went back and I bought the company that I had apprenticed at before I came to RIT.
And what kind of work did they do at that point?
We did commercial printing, color printing. It was a small business, and that's in the Boston area.
So how many employees did you have by the time you were? Have you retired, or are you still working?
Well, I'm 74 now. I retired at the age of 72. The company that I had owned was a company called Northeast Offset, and I had a guy that I was associated with. He ran the inside of the shop, and I ran the outside of the shop. And so we grew from like 6 employees to about 46 when I sold out to him, and then ended up being an independent rep in the printing industry. And when I was doing high-end full-color work, college view books, those kinds of things, catalog work. And then what happened was as the technology changed dramatically, I needed to reinvent myself. And I think the creativity that I learned in my RIT experience kind of helped me. You know, we had a unique experience when I was in school. We had artists and photographers and engineers and chemists, and so I learned a lot of disciplines or understanding and respect for a lot of disciplines that I might not have otherwise in another school.
And it was a smaller campus
Oh,
then.
really small. Yeah,
Everybody
we knew
knew
everybody.
I
We knew
know.
everybody. Yeah, definitely.
You know, one of our questions is, do you remember President Mark Ellingson?
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Absolutely.
I've been told that he knew students' names.
Yeah. You'd walk through the quadrangle. We had this quad. It was just concrete between buildings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can. Okay, you're on. You said I just wanted
Yeah.
you to repeat in case you had something to
Okay.
say about.
Well, when I was in school, after I left the dormitory my freshman year, I pledged Phi Sigma Kappa, and we lived on Atkinson Street, which was kind of down the end of Spring Street. It was a walk, we could walk to class without a problem. And that, I think, now is a lawyer's row. It was part of an old ward in that city that was pretty run down and pretty bad section when I was there. And I think they've restored it, and as I understand, my old house is
Yeah, parts of Corn
pretty good
Hill
shape
are
now.
really nice now,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah.
an upscale neighborhood.
Yeah.
But near it, and near where the old campus was, there is still